We're still trying to make sense of what's going on in Matthew 27, verse 51. Jesus has just died on the cross, and then the temple of the curtain is torn in two. The earth shakes and the rocks split. And then it says, verse 52, Matthew 27, the tombs broke open, and the bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs, and after Jesus' resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many people. What on earth is going on here, and what are we to make of this as historically minded people? I spent a bunch of time at the mic recording my thoughts on this and wrestling it through, and it got way too long, so you got half of that yesterday. I'm just going to play a little music and pick up where we left off here today. I don't know whether the centurion in verse 54 is coming to his moment of belief as Jesus is right there on the cross, or if maybe Matthew is describing something that happened in part while Jesus was there on the cross and that was more fully realized by the centurion and others who had participated a little bit later on, something that could be evident in an after-the-fact interview that may or may not have been conducted. But in Matthew 27:54, it says, when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, surely he was the Son of God. And in that regard, Matthew is kind of taking the reader by the hand and saying, look, all of these details I'm giving you are physical and real, and this is the effect they had on someone who just got done literally killing Jesus. This is a maximum about face, readers. Now, I think it's pretty clear that Matthew believes that the darkness, Jesus' behavior on the cross, the curtain thing, the earthquake, the rocks splitting, and the tombs breaking open, and probably then, a couple of days later, at the point of the resurrection, people coming out of those and going back into the city, looks like Matthew is saying that's compelling. That should be enough for people to believe. But will it be enough for everybody to believe? Like, if this actually happened historically, why didn't everybody become a Christian? But remember over in Luke, what is that? That's Luke 16, right? The story of Lazarus and the rich man that we've looked at a few times. I'm cheating over here to look. Yeah, it's Luke 16. And in that passage, remember the punchline of the whole thing is that the rich man is down there suffering. He's looking up at Lazarus at Abraham's side, and he's like, oh, I'll go warn my family and everything. And Abraham's like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. Because if they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, they won't be convinced even if someone rises from the dead. Indeed, even Matthew 13 and the parable of the sower and the seeds, the nuggets of truth that fall on the different types of soil. There's nothing wrong with the seed. There's nothing wrong with the truth. But sometimes there is something wrong with the soil, and it just isn't receptive to things that are true and real. In this case, a difficult to believe true and real thing, it looks like Matthew is holding out, but still one that if someone is predisposed to say, no, Jesus is absolutely wrong, and I'm not going to budge on that no matter what, and they put their name on the line fully, I mean, maybe some people would flip based on better evidence, but some others are going to double down and say, no, I'm not flipping on that. So on the one hand, you got the centurion who shouldn't flip, but he does because of all these things that happen immediately in the proximity of the cross, but also over the course of the next few days. And then by contrast, you've got the religious leaders who go on an information suppression campaign. They are going to double down, even though they're looking at the same data. Even though I have to think that if people actually came back from the grave, there were religious leaders who were like, isn't that Ted? Huh. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to go talk to him because as much as it would be great to catch up and find out what happens in the great beyond, it would be absolutely devastating for my case. And you laugh, but you know people who are wired both ways. People for whom the most demeaning, horrible, unacceptable experience ever would be to be publicly wrong about a thing. And people who are more willing to have been proven wrong about something, eat a little humble pie and lean into whatever they now understand truth to be. The point being, all of these events, including people coming back to life, I think are being presented by Matthew as evidence for the reality of who Jesus is and a vindication of what Jesus said would happen and of his innocence, that he is indeed the king, that he is indeed the Messiah, that he is indeed the Son of God, God in the flesh. And some people are going to look at that evidence and be like, yep, that's it. What more could you ask for? And other people, For whatever reason, they just aren't. Does it stick in my craw that we have no extra biblical surviving written account of this incredibly memorable detail? Yeah, at the risk of making some of you not like me or be frustrated with me or make you worry that I don't like or trust the Bible enough, I'm just going to admit it. It does stick in my craw. To me, this is one of both the really beautiful and compelling passages of Matthew and also one of the problematic passages of Matthew. It seems more likely than not to me that there would be some external record here, but not damningly more likely than not. It's even possible that the seemingly fantastical nature of the claim is part of the reason that maybe some didn't want to stake their reputation with this. Maybe some didn't want to write this down. Maybe some were just tired of trying to defend this thing. We're like, I'd just rather deal with the Jesus stuff and other stuff because I don't seem to get a lot of traction trying to claim that people came back to life, even though I saw them and I talked to them and they totally did. Maybe that's part of why this story isn't passed down to us, if indeed it is a thing that did happen. And I believe that indeed the text does hold it out as a thing that did happen. We could probably take another month talking about this stuff because it's so interesting. It gets us into theories of history. It gets us into human psychology. It gets us into really healthy debate between people who love the Bible and believe in God, who would look at this and say, I think there's some kind of lost genre figurative thing going on here. And those who, like me, would say total respect on that opinion, but I just cannot escape that it looks like it's being held out in its immediate and grander context as a literal presentation of something Matthew would have us believe literally occurred. And I'm content to just grapple with my discomfort on that. Also, hey, I hope you've caught it, but I'm fully confessing I feel discomfort with this passage. I can't get around the fact that it looks like Matthew's telling us about a thing that he is saying happened. I also can't get around the fact that I've never seen anything like that happen in my own life. And it feels like it defies reality so greatly, and it feels so strange that nothing else would be written down. But at the same time, historical theory tells me that sometimes amazing things do get lost to history. And maybe this was a claim that was so fantastical on its face that people didn't know what to do with it or how to write about it. And so they threw their energy at writing things down about Jesus, and fewer people decided to try to bite off this more difficult to defend or articulate or even describe or make sense of event that happened alongside the Jesus stuff. However you read it, grace and peace to you, my friends. This has been enjoyable to grapple with. I think anybody who reads this from any perspective can agree. Matthew is trying to provide immediate physical details that came after the death of Christ to say this was not the death of a normal person. And Jesus is indeed who he says he was, and even outsiders could look at it and do the math in their heads and say, dang, that guy was indeed the Son of God. From the grander biblical sense, this looks like a payoff on a whole bunch of notions about resurrection and life being about more than the body and God being master over these things. Indeed, God's redemptive plan has to tackle the issue of separation between God and man, and it has to tackle the issue of mortality and death. And these details, that being the curtain stuff and the resurrection of many holy people stuff, it seems to speak to both of those things. Whew! That's a lot of resurrected dead people conversation. I enjoyed it. Thank you for kicking it around with me. Remember, everybody who's supporting the program in any way, be it at patreon.com/the TMBH podcast, or those of you who have so generously kicked in individual support, or those of you who are jumping on with the new Planning Center support option that's available through the webpage, thetmbh.com/support. Anybody whose address I have who is currently supporting the program, I'm going to send you a couple of new notebooks for our upcoming series, going through each of the books of the Bible one day at a time. And after that, the one on Esther. Those are getting designed up and printed hopefully later this week, which means that you will have those coming your way in not too long. I think those notebooks make the whole experience way more fun, and it kind of fits with that idea that we always talk about here of, hey, we're going to get a book of the Bible in our hip pocket, because it's like you can actually fit those notebooks. They'll fit in your hip pocket. See what I did there? See, that's pretty cool. Thanks to everybody who kicks in to make this thing happen. You're the reason it exists, and I appreciate you enormously. Thanks to everybody who does not kick in to make this thing happen. I am thrilled that you are here. This thing is free, and there is no expectation or obligation on you. Rock and roll, everybody. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.